Good morning, everyone. My name is Jyotirmoy Chatterjee. I'm a director at Dasra and lead the Giving Pine Network. A warm welcome to the launch event of the first of its kind flagship report on animal welfare in India, co-anchored by India Animal Fund and Dasra. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. This is also a very special year for us at Dasra as we complete 25 years of being in service of the social sector. And across these 25 years, we've always strived to pick up underfunded issues and themes and garner greater collaborative action and philanthropy towards these issues. And we're glad to have partnered with the India Animal Fund to build greater momentum towards the animal welfare ecosystem in India. And as we gather here today to celebrate our passion and love for animals, it's crucial to address the urgency and need for action and greater investment from the philanthropic community in the animal welfare space. Animals play an integral role in our ecosystems and communities, yet they very often face immense suffering and neglect. Today's conversation aims to shed light on these pressing issues, highlight the interconnected nature of animal welfare with other sectors' issues, and learn from experts and evangelists on how to drive collective action across a diverse range of stakeholders. We have an amazing lineup of speakers who will provide invaluable insights from their experiences and work in animal welfare. Thank you all for sending in your questions in the RSVP forms. We have tried to incorporate as many of them in the questions that we will be putting forward to the panelists, but feel free to also use the chat box to share your thoughts and questions with us. Investing in animal welfare is an investment in our collective future, we believe, a future where all beings, human and animals alike, can thrive in harmony. We hope this conversation acts as a catalyst for change, igniting compassion in our hearts and galvanizing momentum to unlock more funding in this space. But without further ado, I'd like to invite Parag Agarwal, co-founder of the India Animal Fund, whose partnership, passion, and expertise have been extremely crucial in shaping this report and championing this cause. Over to you, Parag, to share your opening thoughts with us.
Uh, can you unmute the video as well for me? Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much, JC. And I'm delighted to be here today at the launch of this report. As JC said, I'm Parag Agarwal. I'm the co-founder of India Animal Fund. I'm really glad that this report is being launched today. And I want to relate my own personal story about awareness. Till about 6 or 7 years back, I used to be completely unaware of the use or rather abuse of animals in our society, whether it was, the leather that's used on my car's seat cover, the leather used in the wallet, or the milk or milk products that I used to consume, or the medicines that I take, or the stray animals on the streets. And this changed about 6 or 7 years back when I saw a video, and that opened a door of awareness for me. The door opened into a completely new world of non-human species. Another world which comprises of species who are also sentient beings like us, who feel pleasure and pain like us, who want to be happy, who want to have a life of dignity. And the reason I narrate this story is because I believe that raising awareness of our society, of many, many stakeholders in the society, is absolutely crucial to make progress, to have a shared future. This report is an attempt to raise awareness and to start many, many conversations in the months and years to come. And I really look forward to this session, and I want to thank everyone who has joined, and a special thanks to all the panel speakers. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to JC.
Thank you so much, Parag, for your thoughts. And I think so we start the session by sharing highlights from our learnings from the report. Over to Kasturi.
Thank you, JC. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kasturi. I lead some of Dasra's flagship research, and I'm a co-author of the report that we're launching today. Our shared future has been a profound learning opportunity for us. And on behalf of my team, I extend deep gratitude to India Animal Fund, Parag, Jaya, and Sandeep, who've been tremendous guides on our research journey. I also extend a warm welcome to our panelists. We're grateful that you're championing this report. And while there are only a couple of us in the room today, we've built this report to represent India's decades-long animal welfare movement, represent the thousands of animal welfare practitioners, professionals, and volunteers, amplify the knowledge of nonprofits, and advocate for the communities closest to the animals. And of course, the billions of animals that share this planet with us. While building this report, one of the first things we realized about animal welfare issues in India was that there's this binary of us and them. And that many think that it takes a special kind of compassion to grapple with the issues animals face. We wanted to rectify this and establish that every animal in this country today, in the wild, on farms, at construction sites, laboratories, and out on the streets, has a dotted line to each of us. Even if we may not see it and feel it right away, the suffering of these animals will ultimately affect us. So this principle was our North Star, and therefore the title, Our Shared Future, highlights the fact that we must see this as a collective issue. Before deep diving into the report, I'd also like to address what we have not included this time, which is wildlife and marine life. While it's undeniable that they are critical domains with grave challenges, we found that there is significant literature already devoted to them. We chose to focus instead on underserved areas with strong human and animal overlaps, as well as the highest concentration of animals. Our report focuses on 4 domains, which is farmed animals, working animals, animals used in experimentation and testing, and community animals. For each of these domains, we've provided sector overviews, the associated legal framework, and stakeholder maps. India currently has about 3.8 billion farmed animals, 70 million working animals, over 1 million animals in laboratories, and 80 million community animals. Their suffering can be understood through the model that you see before you. Highly unnatural, their suffering can be understood through the model that you see before you. Highly unnatural and painful life cycles involving varying degrees of commodification, confinement, invisibility, and insecurity. In our report, we detail how this pans out on the ground with special attention to India's historical socio-economic complexities. So, for example, we situate the issue of intensive factory farming within the micro and macroeconomic factors in India and globally. By doing this, we avoid placing blame on the communities working on these farms and insist that we need to focus on system change and their capacity to ensure welfare. For each of these domains, we've also made sure to spotlight India-specific solutions based on innovation and affordability, and unpack what ethical production and equitable consumption mean within the Indian landscape. Next slide. Within each domain, we've also detailed the cascading effects of animal suffering on human communities and the environment. How issues like public health, climate change, labor welfare, livelihoods, and mental health are adversely affected due to intensive animal-based industries. I'm going to give you an example here. Consider the crates of eggs that you see stacked at your neighborhood grocery store, right? 80% of the eggs that we consume in India come from factory farms, where hens are confined to battery cages, which are the size of A4 size paper. They're unable to turn, squat, or spread their wings for most of their lives. Workers operate without protective gear. They're walking through piles of droppings and swarms of flies all the time, breathing in toxic air and fumes from the breakdown of animal excreta on the premises. Wastewater from these farms, which is often untreated, contaminates the groundwater, leading to long-term exposure and serious health issues for nearby communities. Another example is the livelihood and health insecurity of equines and their human keepers who work in transport on hill stations like Mathiran and Vaishnav Devi. Our report calls out the critical need for stakeholders to focus on such areas and champion holistic and inclusive welfare solutions for them. Obviously, this is not easy or enjoyable reading, but it's important. Most importantly, there is great work being done on the ground to solve these problems. I'll now hand it over to my colleague Aditi to speak about this work and walk you through India's animal welfare action landscape.
Thanks, Kasturi. My name's Aditi. I'm also one of the co-writers on this report. And I'll dive a little bit into understanding what the current spread of interventions looks like in India. Presently, the interventions in the country fall into 5 big buckets, which are mentioned over here, which is essentially rescue and rehabilitation, capacity building, education and outreach, policy and advocacy, and research. I'm going to double click a little bit on each of these just to give you an idea of what I mean by the kind of work that's happening, which is essentially for the first one, rescue and rehabilitation, to scale efforts and establish protocols for the safe and humane rescue or treatment and rehabilitation. On the one hand, NGOs have been creating SOPs to build the different types of, depending on the different types of cases. And on the other, government bodies and foundations have been setting up species-specific hospitals to provide medical and recuperative services. To give an example, this would be just adding on from what Kasturi was also bringing. A lot of the horses that do provide services to go to and fro from the mountainous regions, specific hospitals are required with respect to when they get injured, and this is some of the work that's already been undertaken. Secondly, with capacity building, to support animal welfare organizations, workforce, and interested youth with financial support, capacity building, and networks to help scale their impact. Sustainable livelihood opportunities are being explored while ensuring that archaic management practices, such as putting nose pegs for camels or overburdening donkeys, are phased out, supporting both the community as well as animal well-being. With respect to education and outreach, to cultivate a contextual understanding of animal welfare that is embedded in evidence, dedicated educational and awareness programs in schools and communities have been undertaken by CSO partners with the aim to bust myths, for example, about animal behavior in open community spaces and promote humane interactions with community animals. Policy and advocacy. Efforts by CSOs have led to expansion of policies to protect animals, here highlighting working animals, where welfare standards such as are now being updated and being better defined by both state governments and are being implemented with the support of CSO partners. Their persistent advocacy efforts have also led to the provision of improved care services and financial compensation for communities working with animals, as well as expanding the scope of what livestock insurance looks like. This is with the caveat that mentioning something animals as livestock still denotes the commodification of the animal. Lastly, for research, increasingly, research institutes, corporates, and the government have increased focus on the use of non-animal models and scientific research to replace the use of animals in experimentation, with the introduction of 21st century tools and infrastructures such as bioengineered human on a chip models and next generation computing models. There is momentum now being picked up to nurture concepts into prototypes, as well as build cost-effective and reliable tools for testing. I've given a small gist of the work being undertaken in the sector at the moment, but the report does provide a detailed spread of the breadth of work that's being undertaken, and we do encourage you to explore this in depth when you do go back to the report. With that, I hand it on to Mahima to take you through what the way forward can look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. Hello, everyone. I'm Mahima, and I'm one of the co-authors of the report as well. I like to walk the room. Next slide, please. I like to walk the room through some of the recommendations tailored for various stakeholders. The path forward requires a collaborative effort from all stakeholders guided by the 4 key pillars. As per our research, we found that these pillars are: first, awareness, we're cultivating a contextual understanding of animal welfare and the role humans can play. This is crucial for building a groundswell of public support for animal welfare initiatives. Second is capital, where increasing financial support for animal welfare research, programs, and practitioners. This financial support is needed to fund research into alternative farming practices, develop educational programs, and support the work of animal welfare organizations. The third pillar is talent. By encouraging careers in animal welfare and providing capacity building for those already working in the field. A skilled workforce is essential for implementing effective animal welfare practices on the ground. Fourth and the final pillar is policy. Enacting thoughtful, evidence-based animal welfare policies that consider the realities on the ground in India. Effective policymaking is essential for creating a legal framework that protects animals and promotes higher welfare standards. Next slide. By using the 4 key pillars, each stakeholder can play a crucial role in catalyzing meaningful change. Here's how each group can contribute. First is funders. Funding is essential for advancing animal welfare with distinct role for different type of funders. Institutional funders can drive multi-stakeholder dialogues to address systemic challenges, whereas individual philanthropists can contribute for building capacities of organizations working on animal welfare. The second cohort is corporates, particularly those in the food and agricultural industries, have a significant responsibility. By adopting higher animal welfare standards throughout their supply chains, they can send a strong message and drive positive change across the industry. Third, governments, which have the power to enact stricter animal welfare regulations and policies. Incentives and support should be provided to producers and farmers transitioning to higher animal welfare systems and alternative agricultural products. Increasing penalties under anti-cruelty laws will ensure better animal protection. Fourth is NGOs, which are the backbone of animal welfare movement in India. They play a crucial role in raising awareness about animal welfare issues, providing care for animals in need, and advocating for legislative change. They must establish an inclusive, India-specific narrative of animal welfare to achieve lasting progress. Finally, consumers. This group have the power to drive change through their purchasing power. At the individual level, adopting kinder, informed, and sustainable consumption decisions is vital. By working together, all stakeholders can play an important role in creating a more compassionate and sustainable world. This will not only benefit animals, but also improve public health, protect our environment, and create a more just society. Thank you, and with this, I'll hand it back to Kasturi.
Thanks, Mahima, and thank you everybody for tuning in. We realized that this might have been a lot in a very short period of time. The actual report is pretty long, and it's always difficult to condense it so quickly. Secondly, animal welfare shouldn't be us preaching to you. It should be a conversation. So with that, we're so excited to move into the second part of today's virtual convening, which is our panel discussion. Very proud to introduce our moderator and panelists to you. As the moderator today, we have Sonia Fernandez. Sonia is the Chief Program Officer at Ashreya Hasta Trust and brings over 17 years of experience in the development sector, managing philanthropic efforts exceeding 500 million rupees annually. A specialist in gender, climate change, and sustainability, she has forged over 60 partnerships with NGOs and various agencies. Sonia, it's great to have you. Now, a little bit about our panelists. Gauri Molekhi. Gauri is a prominent animal rights advocate and the trustee of People for Animals. She's been instrumental in driving legislative and policy changes to protect animals in India. Jaya Simha Nugehali. Jaya Simha is a renowned animal rights lawyer and the co-founder of India Animal Fund. He's been a pivotal figure in numerous legal battles for animal rights and works tirelessly to ensure the protection of animals and safeguard their rights. Abodh Aras. Abodh is the CEO of the Welfare of Stray Dogs and the chairperson of the Federation of Indian Animals Protection Organizations. He's a passionate animal welfare activist and has been deeply involved in initiatives aimed at improving the lives of street animals, focusing on rescue, spay, neuter, rehabilitation, and awareness programs. Anita Dongre. Anita is the chairwoman, founder, and chief creative officer of House of Anita Dongre and has seamlessly integrated sustainability and ethical practices into fashion. She's a passionate supporter of animal welfare and has been actively involved in initiatives that promote cruelty-free fashion. CK Venkatraman. CK is the managing director of Titan Company Limited and a prominent business leader with a strong focus on corporate responsibility. Kalpana Das. Kalpana is an animal empath who is deeply committed to the cause of animal welfare. Her passionate and empathetic approach have enabled her to make significant strides in advocating for animal rights and protection. Raj Mariwala. Raj is the director of Mariwala Health Initiative and a practicing feline and canine behaviorist. Raj has made significant contributions to the animal welfare sector, not only through funding, but also by dedicating personal time and effort, working with street animals as well as in urban bird rescue and rehabilitation. Shrikant Velamakani. Shrikant is the co-founder and vice chairman of Fractal Analytics. Fractal is an AI firm that powers decision-making some of the largest and most admired companies on the planet. Shrikant began eating a plant-based diet in 2011. His empathy and commitment to veganism make him a respected voice in the animal welfare community. With that, handing it over to you, Sonia. Thank you.
Thanks, Kasturi, for that lovely introduction and making my job a lot easier with the introducing the speakers also. Uh, Lovely panel here. We've got very powerful and diverse practitioners, philanthropists, NGO space, stakeholders, advocates of the animal rights space, and advocates in both the fashion space and also the policy space here, right? So I'm super excited to be moderating this panel. Welcome all of you. And thank you, Giving Five, for actually having this discussion, right? So I also encourage you to go through the report. It's 93 pages. It took me all night, right? But each page is worth it, and each page is wonderful. Um, I also understand that, while the report didn't cover the wildlife space, there's so much in the domestic, urban, rural space to be written about and to be spoken about, right? And I think through this panel, we're going to dwell into the significance of working in the animal welfare, which I also call the care, protection, and safeguarding of animals, in the urban and rural space. And also, most importantly, how do we look at the space comprehensively, right? We have organizations across the country working on very diverse issues, many working with domestic animals, a lot working in very different ways, right? And there is also a will for the rural space to start looking at farm animals and working animals. So how do we look at it comprehensively and collaborate together? So with that, let's get into the panel discussion. I have got so many questions. Each one of you all have got a very different question to answer. So starting with Raj. Hi, Raj. Morning.
Hi, morning.
Morning. So I've known you a lot from the mental health space, okay, and I think you've done amazing things there. You've been ahead of your time, and a lot of us continue to wonder what Mariwala Initiatives is doing in the mental health space, and we're eagerly looking at it. Now, the animal welfare space is going to be something like that, right, in the future for you. So how do we as an organization or as stakeholders in the space build an interest and priority in the animal welfare space, right? And how do we build in that entire solidarity, which is so needed initially in this area?
Right. I mean, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And part of me always grudges my mental health work for taking away time from my animal related work. But I think the divide between these two is artificial. And so I think to inspire people and encourage people, I want to say that animal rights and animal welfare is really part of the urgency of our times. We are in an ecological crisis. There are many global changes. The urgency of climate change is, affecting life as we know it. And that's why animal welfare needs attention. Because if we are to imagine a different future, we need to look at rights, liberation, and justice. And to do that, we can't silo animal rights and animal welfare anymore. And we can't give in to the idea of the zero sum thinking that it's one or the other, because animal rights is very structurally connected to the environment, to water, to wildlife, to human health. I mean, just for example, industrial agriculture, large scale fishing contribute to climate crisis, but are also very deeply linked to animal rights, human rights, and inequality. And that's the reason that International Animal Rights Day, in fact, is celebrated on the anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because the interconnections between both these days are critical. And I think I want to call out to those who aren't enthralled by the idea of animal rights by drawing on some history. The animal advocacy movement has always had great space for coalitionary bridge building practices. How in 1832, the British government decided to kill stray dogs, and they decided to pay 8 annas per killed dog. So on June 6th, a holy day for Parsis, they called on the British to stop the killing. And there were strikes, there were Rasta Rokos in Fort, in Bhindi Bazaar. And in the coming days, the Parsis who were trading community were joined by their fellow traders from Hindu communities, Jain communities, and Muslim communities. This was the first major disruption of trade, of colonial rule, and even more significantly, the disruption was by the Parsi community, who up until that point had actually supported British because they were kind of flourishing under them. I'll make this quick. Second example, it's not just from India. In 1905, Upton Sinclair wrote a book called The Jungle on the violent and unclean practices of the Chicago meat industry. And doing this, he drew like very strong attention to animal welfare, but also to mass worker exploitation, unsafe working conditions, and excessive pollution, what I describe as the idea of corporate responsibility. So anyone who's interested in development paradigms needs to inculcate an animal rights perspective, because we will otherwise keep on doing the same unsustainable actions that have gotten us here in the first place.
Thank you so much, Raj. And the story of the Parsi community, I mean, I'm from Bombay, right? So we all hear the story about the Parsi community, about the milk and the sugar. I don't know if you know a little about that. But yes, the intersectionality between climate action and animal rights is so very strong and intensive, right? But we need to start unraveling it. So coming to Abodh, hi, morning. So about
Hi.
my question for you is that you've been in the corporate space for the longest time, and I think it's also an exciting space to be in. I'm not sure so much about it, but I'm just saying that it's an exciting space. Could you share a little about your journey or your transition from the corporate space to the animal rights space, right? And that transition journey, and also what what were your learnings and insights that you had when you moved to the space and and started building organizations also?
Yeah, thanks so much, and thank you for inviting me here. Um, I mean, I kept getting asked this question years ago when not too many people used to leave the corporate world. Today, I think it's become very common. So I think hats off to people who do that. And I think I mean the reason I did it was that, of course, love for animals. I was brought up with cats and dogs. My grandfather, parents, etc., used to keep lots of cats in the house. And what happened was that one incident really changed and my life. There was a puppy that I had found with a wound at Oval Maidan near Churchgate in Mumbai, and the only thing I could do was take it to the animal hospital and leave it there. And that time, I think I was doing my MBA, and I my mother called me and said after about 20 days, the puppy was sent home. And then I saw that the puppy had really, it was in a miserable condition. It had bloating. It was almost dying. And that time I didn't know anything about, veterinary care. So I kept calling a vet and she told me what to do. I kept crying away and the puppy didn't make it. And that made me think, saying that, what if I had not taken the puppy there? You couldn't blame the hospital because the puppy had caught some infection. And that's when I trained under a vet and started what was called the on-site first aid, or what now is called the on-spot first aid program, way back in 1996. And that time, I mean, the learnings from the corporate world of systems and, SOPs, etc., really helped in setting this program. And we started it all over Mumbai in different groups in Mumbai and in the suburbs. And that came a long way, not only to help animals, but it also helped spread awareness. Because remember that the man on the street looks after street animals. The boot polish wala, the pan wala, the hawker, the street dweller. 60% of Bombay's population lives on the street or the slums. And uh, uh, here we were going and treating the animals, but we also wanted to implement a sterilization program. And why would they give their animals to us forcibly? I mean, that was the only way we could, control the street dog population humanely and bring down rabies. So this initiative of community, which actually took along everybody, really helped with not only reaching out to them, but also stemming cruelty per se, because they used to look at people come and treat the animal, and they said, "Oh, this is not a threat to them. It's not a threat to us, because otherwise, till then, they would have been, hitting a dog or shooing a dog away or killing a dog that had a maggot wound per se." So I think these are some of the insights that really help. I mean, also in terms of the learnings from corporate world. I mean, and all the jargon that we always have, a strategic planning, volunteer management, fundraising, so on and so forth. So that really helped the organization, per se, without, of course, compromising on core values of course, compassion, because that is needed, and of course, of a non-profit. And I think, the stories of the relationships that street people on the street have with the street dogs and cats is just amazing. I mean, they will name them after their Rani, Tommy, sometimes Salman, Shah Rukh, and Aishwarya after their favorite film stars. And I think that is something very important. One more thing learned, of course, is that, remember, from the corporate world, one comes with a lot of need for competition, which is not existing in a non-profit, where another organization is not a competitor, and you naturally need to work together for a common cause. So And also, I think today there are so many various animal welfare organizations and young people who are doing so much in terms of, not only grassroots level work, but also, advocacy, awareness, policy change, and so on. And I think hats off to them. So I think we've come a long way, and a lot of it, of course, what we as the welfare of stray dogs or even FIAPO has done, has stemmed from all the learnings, from the corporate world and yeah. So I think I hope that answers your question.
Very well, I must say. Um, I think the corporate world has so much to provide us. I mean, the experience from the corporate world when it comes to a lot of the organizations that we work with also lack on systems and processes, right? While they have got the passion and the heart to want to do it, they've been doing that for 15 years and still they won't have like policies, guidelines, a simple ERP system, right? Or a simple system of tracking data is something that is difficult for them to get access to because of the funding. So that actually comes to the next question that I have to Jaisimha is that what are the gaps that you've identified that led you to the formation of AIF? And maybe a little bit about AIF.
Sure. Thanks so much, Sonia, and really exciting. And just to kind of give a history, I've always been involved within the animal welfare movement for about roughly about 2 decades now. And when Parag reached out a few years ago, initially we were trying to solve a problem. And the problem really was that we were, as Abod said, there were a growth of the animal welfare movement. There were many, many animal welfare organizations who were coming on board. And they were moving away from the traditional SPCAs, dog and cat groups, who were broadly dominated for a long period of time. And we were seeing growth of organizations who were doing plant-based outreach, farm animal welfare, and many other things. And one of the biggest bottleneck that was identified at that point of time was the talent bottleneck. So people were looking to hire. They know it was really hard to hire someone, and you would just not find people. And even when you hire, then retention was an issue. When you peeled an onion, you figured out that one of the primary reason for that was, as much as the movement was growing, our systems, in a sense, like the monetary incentives, obviously, working for animals, you get a huge amount of job satisfaction, but finally, at the end of the month, you work for an animal or not, you still have to pay your rent, mortgage, electricity bill, so on and so forth. And I think the issue really was that while people were getting attracted to the movement, there wasn't enough resources to pay and sustain the movement for a long period of time, and that led to burnout and just offices not having basic HR policies, and because finally after the first month it ends up being another job, where and you have humans interacting with one another. So we were trying to solve a problem, and Parag's education world involvement in the past, he came up with the idea of setting up the first formal fellowship program, the Ahimsa Fellowship Program, to induce more talent into this movement. And what went corollary with that was we were now getting all of this talent. We had to raise money as well. And I guess that's the genesis of the India Animal Fund. And it was trying to solve a problem in the sense there was some amount of foreign money coming into India, but given the geopolitics and the social realities of India, it became more and more hard. It also meant that foreign money was only available for organizations who were in existence for 2 to 3 years. That also meant, having any sort of charity entrepreneurship became hard. So we were seeking at two different things. Like if you're a startup for profit, you in fact have an enabling climate. But if you're a nonprofit in a startup, you have all sorts of roadblocks getting your 12A, 80G, FCRA permission, and it becomes a nightmare to actually experiment on a new project. And that kind of brought together India Animal Fund. And one of the key differentiator was trying to identify initiatives that just didn't melt the donor heart, but did the most good for the animals. And I feel like the India Animal Fund experiment has been such a great success. With the support, we've been able to bring in over 100 people, 120 people into the movement. And I mean, like professional movement as full-time career in the past few years. We've been able to sustain a lot of these fundings through domestic fundraising, a lot of it through small ticket, some through HNI, UHNI, and CSR funding. And the third and the most important aspect is that we've now been able to, with the Dasra report and funding, identify places where there is the most amount of need from the animals, which may or may not be the obvious rhetoric that feeds into the bleeding heart of a typical donor, and doing the systemic change. And that's where India Animal Fund came in. And I'm really excited that this is a watershed movement in the sense like this, putting together this report with Dasra and expanding our horizon to donors beyond the traditional animal welfare givers to the issue and the intersectionality that exists.
Thank you. When you speak about systems change, right, I think the animal welfare movement space is in the right time. And there's always a right time, right? So, for example, systems change would not have been a conversation about 15 years back, right? But now in this space, it's everywhere whether it's gender, whether it's livelihood or climate action, we're speaking about system change. And I think the term of Ahimsa Fellowship Program is so unique. It's lovely and it's beautiful. And ahimsa is such a lovely word. So coming to Anita, you've also got a lovely term that you've used, which is rewild, right? In your fashion space, right, or fashion sector. I'm running short on words there. Sorry. So maybe you could speak a little bit about the entire approach that you're following when it comes to sustainability or animal rights as a space or humanity as a space, being humane to animals. How is it that you're approaching the space through fashion, and is there a potential of raising funds in the future, or as of today in the area? Anita, you're muted, or I can't hear you because I can't see your mute icon on.
Is it better, Sonia?
Try again another sentence if possible.
Sonia, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we'll manage. I think you should go ahead. Yes, we can hear you a little weakly, but we'll manage. Go ahead. Yeah, Anita, go ahead. Okay. It's seeing
Sonia,
Anita.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm not muted, Sonia. I'm not muted. Sorry, I'm in Delhi in a hotel and my network is really bad. Can you hear
But
me?
I could somebody from Dasra think that we can hear her and she can go ahead and answer.
Sonia, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Anita.
Yeah, I don't think she can hear us. So maybe you could just ping her on chat or call her and
So
say
I
that she
really
could.
think that fashion is a very powerful medium, Sonia, to use to raise funds. And I think that's exactly what we did with Rewild. For us, Rewild is a movement that we'd like to make it a collective, larger movement and use Rewild as, to raise funds to be a voice for animals. Okay, it's lagging behind a little bit. So I just think fashion is a very powerful medium to use to raise funds. And that's what we tried to do at Rewild. It was our first show. It was a big learning. We've been having conversations, in fact, with Dasra on how we can make this movement larger and bigger in the coming years. And I definitely think fashion can be used for good because the fashion industry, firstly, is one of the largest perpetrators of animal cruelty. So we'd like to use fashion to create awareness on the fact that fashion can work responsibly towards animal cruelty in the first place. So there's a lot that can be done with fashion, I think.
Thanks, Anita. Okay. So moving on Thank you, Anita. I don't think she can hear me, but so we move on to CK. Morning, CK. How are you doing? Good. All right. So,
Wonderful.
I,
Thank you.
good. I think Anita covered a stakeholder that actually is very critical, both as a participant and also as a group that is important to raise funding and awareness around animal rights. And being in the philanthropy space or the CSR space, we consistently are asked the question by the CSR that what is it that we can support? What is different? What is innovative, right? That can be actually picked up by CSR. And I think Jason Mark covered the entire transition and evolution from domestic stray animals to farm animals to ethical practices to the plant-based diet, right? So maybe you could speak a little bit about sustainability and the ethical supply chain for us to understand it better, and also how CSR can get into it to support these initiatives.
We had a meeting of all our CSR partners of Titan Company just last week, and there was not a single partner who represented animals. And I was just thinking about that in the context of today's conversation. It's also because the problems in India with respect to people are so large and so impossible, they appear impossible to solve, that our thoughts actually don't even go to animals. And I'm afraid it'll remain like that for a long while unless there is a certain foot in the door approach that the not-for-profit animal sector takes, which brings animals through the sustainability argument into the conversation. What I mean by that is, for example, we have an integrated village development program that we support in Uttarakhand, where women belonging to self-help groups who are also involved in dairy, who are involved in poultry and goatry and all that. And through a Tata Trust initiative, Titan supports that integrated village development program. But there is no current animal angle to it. We know that, and the Dasra report would also confirm. And we know that in poultry, in dairy, there is a lot of animal suffering. So, one idea I have, something I can think of is, if the not-for-profit organizations working in Uttarakhand, for example, were to partner with Himathan, which is actually a Tata Trust wing, to bring in the animal welfare angle into an integrated village development. And if Himatan can be persuaded to expand the scope of that, to invest some parts of it into the dairy, so a more humane dairy, more humane, where the battery cage is made bigger, for example, and baby steps are taken in that front, and the subject of animals is brought into the corporate world through that. And that's the only way I can see, because otherwise, even as somebody who is responsible for CSR in Titan, ultimately, even my own leaning towards that, when I see the suffering at scale of humans, honestly, even my own leaning towards that would be limited. Even though I'm a vegan myself, I feel for animals myself, but I would end up putting humans ahead of animals. But if there was an integrated view that was brought in by the not-for-profit sector, we would become more open, and the vocabulary in CSR would start having animals in, even though they may be at the fringe in the beginning, but it anyway would take decades for us to make a change. It would be an important beginning like that.
Thanks, TK. That's actually gotten me thinking, right? For example, a lot of animal welfare work is done through passion and art, right? Whereas work on human welfare, whether it's climate action or it's education or it's health, it's done because it is a priority, it's a government priority, it's a policy, right? And it's also something that aligns with government mandates for the country, and those are set as development goals. Animal rights are not development goals. And I think That's perhaps a missing piece that we need to also address. So coming to Gauri, right, and you've seen the sector. I think you've been in the sector for the longest time. You've seen it. You've been one of the first movers in the space, and I can't imagine how difficult that journey would have been, right, at a time when you started advocating for animal rights and welfare. So could you, one is, I don't think that's a part of the question that is here, but one is I'd really like to, or we'd really like to understand, are you happy with the way the evolution is happening? I mean, from where we were to where we are, and what are the challenges that you see the sector facing right now, right? Can be overcome, that are manageable to move ahead?
I think the day we are happy, we should quit. So, no, we're not happy because it's far too slow. There's much, much more to be done. We have made small steps forward, but this should only prompt us to take bigger and faster steps forward. Otherwise, we'll never be able to catch up with the kind of cruelty, especially to the subjects that you covered in your report, Sonia. Farmed animals, working animals. We cannot sit pretty. There's just way too much to be done, but we are moving ahead, and that's a good sign. I'd say when I started, got into the movement, it was more about direct care, and there was little or nothing that one could contribute towards subjects such as farmed animals. There was no in public information. I was all of 18 years old, so there was no information. There was no understanding, there was no research or work being done towards these animals that one could participate in, and the civil society could do something about. So that's from there to coming to a point where now there are professionals working out solutions for resolving factory farming issues, for doing a ton of outreach, getting people to understand the intersectional impacts of factory farming. What happens when you consume products like dairy, eggs, or meat from places where these animals are stuffed, overcrowded, injected with hormones and antibiotics, and the impact on the environment. So now it's all coming together. So I'd say that's a huge step forward. I like to name one example, which is slightly tangential. When the first time I had to go to court on an animal matter, it was regarding animal sacrifice. Not a single lawyer agreed to take my case because they did not understand the animal laws, and they thought that this is not a subject. I'm talking about Uttarakhand High Court, and compare that to now, where the top lawyers of the country are contributing their time pro bono for animals, win or lose, but at least there is a voice for animals. So that's heartening, and it's a good direction that we're heading towards. So that's what I see happening for us. From a hobby, it's become a profession. It's become like a structured work.
And I think that's a good direction to go ahead. So coming to you, Kalpana, right? It would be good to also get a sense of where you started with, right? When you saw the exploitation of animals? That's perhaps a phase, but a little bit about how that journey started. And from your experience, how do we raise more awareness about it? While we are sitting here, sometimes we preach the choir, right? But I also see a lot of stakeholders, a lot of individuals, choosing veganism, for example. I've seen international conferences going vegan. So how do we raise more awareness about it?
Sure. So my journey probably didn't start overnight. It was years ago when I was probably just 12 years old, and my dad was posted in Kerala, a northern part of Kerala, which is predominantly a place where it's just hugely beef eating. So back from school, my mom took me to the market. I was in school uniform, and I witnessed this scene where a calf was being snatched away from the mother. And that scene traumatized me. The cry of the mom and that calf just left me devastated. I became a vegetarian overnight. And for years, I was a strict vegetarian. And then I started traveling abroad for my work and things like that. where vegetarian food was not very easily available, I would eat scrambled egg because I didn't want to know that I was eating something. I would look at an egg and think a chicken would pop out. So it was very hard on me, but then I would try to see what I can do. And then I had very close friends in the UK who had Christmas, and I would go for Christmas to their homes. And I would try and see what is it that I could eat. And I would think that, not much. So I would just try and eat fish or fillet maybe, or maybe eggs. And back India, and absolutely strict vegetarian. Now, fast forward a few years later, in 2007, I somehow started eating just fish or fillets and eggs. And I met my husband in London, and we both started eating fish and eggs for some reason. 2015, our girls came into our lives. And our little Mahi, my younger daughter Mahi, she was just 5 years old. She would question me on things like I had taken them to Inox in Bombay and shown them this movie called Finding Dory or Finding Nemo, one of the two movies. And she was not happy at all. She said, "Why do we keep animals in captive? Why was that fish kept in captive?" I thought, wow, what a lovely movie. Watched it, enjoyment, came back home. And the caretaker brought a lovely plate of fish for us, for me and my husband. And she looks at it and says, that story, it's on your plate. I couldn't just touch it. Ken, I had taken her to the parade in Delhi, for the Republic Day. And she was just 6 or 8, and she would say, "This is not right. That animal doesn't want to be dressed up. That animal doesn't want to do this parade." And I started questioning myself, and that she's just a child and has a lot more empathy than what I do. And I think the changing point was when the nutritionist used to tell her that, "Ma, you have very weak muscles, you have to eat more eggs." And she cried and told the nutritionist that it's not that I don't like the taste of eggs, I don't feel good about it. And I felt that one needs to be evolved to know that there is a life and you're taking the life away, whether it is farm raised or whether it is unfertilizable eggs or things like that. So subsequently, that was influencing me. Every time I would take something leather, she would say, "Has this animal been killed for your leather bag, or hasn't leather?" It would raise questions in my own head. And I would say, "No, it's not done that way." I had no idea. I think Parag mentioned, I had no idea what was going on in the industry. It's not commercial if you keep waiting for an animal to die and then take the leather and the bone. And then I have a house full of bone china. I had no idea how the bones came, and I didn't even think about it. Just, "Oh, it's pretty, just buy it." And on the contrary, where I go very proactively talk about how it happens and things like that. So my journey has been not overnight, but I've been a strict vegan now, perhaps a year ago, where I've completely stopped buying wool, silk, leather, but I still have from the past, but I'm not accepting or not. It's not an easy thing. For instance, like Parag said, but medicines or things that are tested on animals. My other daughter Priyanka taught me. She got some cosmetics from the UK or US. She gave it back to me and she said, "Do you know these have been tested on animals?" I said, "No, I didn't read the labels." She said, "Read the labels." And she's also just a child. And she said, "Read the labels. Do not support any of these big brands if they're testing on animals." And so I think my two girls have been my guru in that sense, where they opened my eyes, my mind, and my heart. And I feel today I'm taking it forward in a way that I can really advocate for this cause and try and help as much. And very often I get asked, "Oh, how has it benefited you?" I don't see a thing as to why people don't see as to how it has not benefited oneself, but how it has helped a certain animal. It is, I don't want to be a contributing factor to that cruelty. So that's been my
Thanks,
journey.
Kalpana.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but I'm fascinated by the story of your girls, right? And I think they're superheroes to
Absolutely.
actually think so beautifully at that age, right? So moving on to Shrikant. Shrikant, I think the question is pretty much the same that I have posed to Kalpana, right? So what is it that drew your attention to the issue of animal rights? And I think this is also through the lens of factory farming and everything that you want to cover in it.
Yeah, I grew up thinking that I know a lot about a lot of things. And I was born and raised vegetarian, so there was not a choice. And I always felt pretty good about, never had the temptation to eat meat. But I was, if somebody, and I was living in the US back then, This is before 2010, and I saw this, burgeoning movement of veganism, and I always thought, what's the big deal? It's vegetarian, veganism, no difference. There's not a big jump to make from being vegetarian to being vegan. And then I watched Forks Over Knives, a documentary on Netflix. I think many of you may have watched it. It's a great documentary by Dr. T. Colin Campbell, which was quite eye-opening for me. And after that, I watched this documentary called Earthlings on YouTube, which was back then available on YouTube for free. I watched that too. And those two documentaries really changed my way of thinking. When your assumptions about something just break, then you are free to reimagine what you are and what you stand for, etc. And then that's when around 2010, 2011, I stopped. I became fully vegan. One of the things that I had not realized is that, and this is most people don't really know, that for every human being on the planet, there are 10 livestock being reared, being grown, right, for our consumption. So there are roughly 80 billion livestock in the world right now, which is, cows, and pigs, and hens, chickens, etc. 80 billion of them on the planet, and we consume all of them every year, and they're in incredibly difficult conditions. So that is where it started. Then I watched a bunch of others like Dominion, What the Health, Cowspiracy, Game Changers, a bunch of very good documentaries. It's not that every single claim in each of these documentaries is perfectly valid, but I think it gave me a good sampling of information that I was not privy to. But once I realized all of this, I definitely changed my way of living. Now, I have to tell you a couple of things. Number one, I am not your classic animal lover per se. I don't believe in cute puppies and all of that stuff. I don't get very excited about having pets at home. I'm not really an animal lover in that classic sense. I believe in compassion. I believe in empathy. And I believe that we do not have a right to control other creatures. The question I ask myself as an AI professional is, if there is an AI tomorrow, in a couple of years from now, a few years from now, which is more powerful than human beings, how will they treat us? Because we have not treated creatures that are less powerful than us. We built technological superiority over the last 2000 years, and then we have treated animals really badly in the process. So how will others treat us if there was such a thing which is more powerful than us? And I believe we compartmentalize. We believe that, I can be an animal lover and yet eat meat. And that is really problematic, because we do not put them in the same bucket. They are actually the same thing. They're sentient beings. It's a cat or a dog or a cow or a pig or a chicken. They're all sentient beings. That's the first thing I want. The second thing I want to say is that so far I have not advocated, because I see this as a very touchy topic. A lot of people have very strong views on it, and they are not able to make peace with it. So I have realized that my philosophy is live and let live. So I have practiced this lifestyle in my world, but I have not tried to change anyone else's view on it, because I don't believe it's that easy to change other people's views on it. But I have seen this conversation in this group, I do feel like, yes, there is a big gap, and there's a lot of awareness gap in the world in general. And maybe some of this awareness will lead to change. So it's hard to still believe that it will happen, right? Because people have awareness, but we compartmentalize in a way that we don't change. So those are some of the initial thoughts here on this topic.
Thanks, Shrikant. So I'm looking at your thoughts as, optimistic and pessimistic. Right? It's somewhere there. But I think while Kalpana's journey was lived experience, yours through documentary is powerful, because you know the entire influencing factor for the next generation would be video documentary, right? It might not be so much of lived experience, which would be perhaps minimal compared to documentary, and the entire aspect of AI, that is phenomenal. We never thought about it that way. Right? So thank you. So coming back to Anita, and I think we've heard very little from you, so I'm coming back to you. If your audio is okay, and
Yes, it's much better. Can you hear me now? And I could hear you all very
yes,
clearly.
it's much better. Yes, so want to hear more from you about One is that how do you think we could, I mean, as a person in the fashion industry, how would you, how would we influence celebrities, right? And also embed this entire cruelty-free practice within the fashion industry, which you spoke about.
Like I said earlier, the fashion industry is one of the industry that practices animal cruelty, because this industry uses leather, fur. I would like to use the power of this collective voice to influence the fashion industry. Otherwise, it's very difficult to influence people. Like Srikant just said, I've had countless arguments with meat eaters who claim they're animal lovers. I've never understood why a person has dogs and spoils their dogs thoroughly and then has beef and different kind of meats on their table. I've never understood that. I just want to say today that, we obviously, this whole group of people who've met here together, all of us feel compassion, and very few humans feel compassion for animals. And here is a group of people who've met here today who are obviously compassionate towards animals, who understand the pain animals go through. And animals today don't have a voice. I would, in fact, request Indian Animal Fund and Dasra, congratulations for this report. How do we take it ahead from this report? How do we use this collective compassion that all of us feel today to drive change? How do we use this to become a voice for animals? How do we now action this report, and what do we do going ahead? Because there's so much to be done. There's very little being done for animals in our country, very, very little. The awareness is really low. Like Srikant said, it's compartmentalized. People don't associate animal cruelty with the meat they're eating on the table. How do we now make an action plan that makes this movement bigger, where we can influence more and more people, where we can make it cool to be an animal lover, where we can make it humane, where we teach human beings that it's how you have to be humane and not have animal cruelty, which has become such a natural part of our lives. We don't even think about it. Today, animal cruelty is just so accepted everywhere. Nobody thinks about it. So how do we utilize this group today to make it more action oriented, and how do we move forward? I would really, I think India Animal Fund and Dasra has a huge role to bringing us all collectively together to, to help in this movement to make it happen.
Thanks, Anita. And action is something that we have to speak about. I mean, it is after all the way we segue into further discussions, right? And this is not the end forum. This is not the end game as such. This is
No,
just the
it can't. This
beginning
is
of a
just the
movement.
beginning. I do realize it's just the beginning, and it's a wonderful beginning, and I'm very hopeful that a lot will come out of today's meeting.
True. And we're all hopeful, and I think we're all optimists here. So coming back to Raj, so again, Anita's point on action is very important, right? And I think we're also running a little bit short on time, and I want to give the space to the audience who have been really great and sending a lot of questions here. I'm hoping I do justice to that. So one is that how you being a philanthropist, right? How is it that we bring other philanthropists on board? What is the action point for a philanthropy to do that, right? Build solidarity, build a space for other philanthropies to relate to, understand, and also commit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with my donor hat on, and this is particularly to philanthropists, the vibrancy of the animal welfare movement in India is pretty much, I mean, I would have to say it's unparalleled. Just to give you an example, 2 nights ago, I got a WhatsApp message from a rescuer. We all are connected by WhatsApp groups. I'm on the WhatsApp group in my locality of Bandra, where we are 40 people who feed, do first aid, spay, neuter, and a bunch of other things for the 500 odd dogs and many more cats who live here, right? And I got a message from a rescuer in Kolaba who got a message from a previous rescuer she had worked with in Shirdi about a dog who got hit by a train. And need was urgent. They had to raise about 50,000. Within 15 minutes, 20,000 was raised. Now, the key is that this sort of pivotal work has gone on forever with a whole lot of labor. And imagine what philanthropists could do if they resource and support this type of momentum. for the animals, for those who live and work around them, and for the idea of what development means. So I'm going to leave it at the power of actually the animal rights movement and them doing work with absolutely bootstrapped funding. And there is need for much more. So step in, because your money is going to be spent very, very effectively. That's it.
Yes, step in. Yeah, because the philanthropy is also tuned to programs, right? So the crowdfunding is quite difficult because they're not built for crowdfunding, right? For immediate funding. A philanthropy takes its time, has a lot of different conversations and all of that. So I think when it comes to what you're saying also, when it comes to the animal rights space, we need to be more quicker, right? To respond because we're already late and we are already not acting fast enough. Coming to both Jaisama and both, I've got the same question to a similar question to both of you all. Is that we speak about a lot of policy, right? We speak about policy when it comes to child rights, about trafficking, about gender, about livelihood. What are the, and I also see that, there is a shift in policy frame when it comes to animal rights and welfare. Could you perhaps speak a little about the action points there, right? When it comes to policy and regulatory frames, are these frames already fantastic and we just need to action them? Or are these frames, on paper, but there is no action and we have to do a lot more as stakeholders to build in that action component? Either one of you
Go
can
first.
take it up.
Go first, Jaisma.
Thanks. So I think I can speak. A vast majority of my career I've spent on public policy, trying to get laws right. In the sense, like we said, well, one of the key things is, can we get better law? And we've seen, at least in India, the common law courts have been pretty progressive. But then it's also a wave. You see a whole bunch of progressive judgments, and then there is something that happens, the socio-political climate changes, judges are humans too. Then you kind of get one particular order that overturns the years of positive thing that's happened, and then you kind of start seeing a decline till a particular point that there is another judge who comes up, puts their neck up, and changes. And I think that's just the way common law works, and I think that's one of the issues that we have. Now, then the other issue has been like, then if common law judges and the courts see this inconsistency overall, then can we have a legislative framework? But sadly, we are seeing very little legislative capacity, time, and bandwidth to deal with issues such as animal welfare. I think in the priorities, if within the philanthropy, if it's low, you can only imagine within the public policy framework how low it sits. And where it does sit, there is definitely a huge issue with agency capture. For example, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act establishes the Animal Welfare Board of India, which is an advisory body. For a longest period of time, it was founded within the Ministry of Animal Husbandry, Dairying and Fisheries. But then for the longest period of time, it was sitting independent. It was sitting within Social Justice. It was sitting within Ministry of Environment and Forest. But the minute we saw, or the government and the missionary saw, that the Animal Welfare Board of India started to take pragmatic, independent views, which might conflict with their larger industry interest, they usurped the power of the Animal Welfare of India, brought it within the Ministry of Animal Husbandry, Dairying and Fisheries. So you kind of end up having a regulatory system where it's all captured. So, a regulator is being captured by the industry that is being regulated, and then you end up not having a system that actually regulates anything. Now, if you leave that aside, then you look at, well, can the industry not self-regulate? And there again, you have all of these global cage-free commitments, animal welfare commitments. Some companies do implement them. Most of them find reasons not to. And again, it kind of ends up being that, well, then there are inflationary pressures. How do we deal with the inflationary pressures? Bottom line with animal welfare. And we see even the most progressive companies not dealing with these issues overall. So I do think that we need to be looking at a paradigm that looks with both public policy and government, public policy and corporate together. And as stakeholders, we need to be just being creative in the ways in which we can help animals.
Thanks. Both. Over to you.
I think, just to add that, like Jaisima said, that it's very important for us to push, our legislature in terms of the, policies or the, the laws that are in place. I mean, look at it that, I mean, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act was passed in 1960. We are in 2024. There has been a bill to amend the act, and it's not been passed. And, people literally get away with murder in terms of being cruel to animals. Or even, I mean, there were some questions here about, the implementation of many things like the animal birth control program or the infrastructure for it, or to make it more effective, or the penalties that are there, or establishing SPCA. So I think, I mean, as a collective, we really need to push, the government to pass all this, because otherwise, I mean, pass and implement, because otherwise, I mean, if there are laws, they are not implemented. Otherwise, there are no laws in place. So I think, like Gauri mentioned earlier, baby steps, and we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think we're all saying the same things, that there are laws, and sometimes we feel there are very good laws, right? And laws generally in India are well developed, iterated, framed, but implementing it is the biggest gap. Gauri, over to you, right? I've got a very different question from the audience also. Is about improving veterinary education in the animal welfare in India, right? And I'm very new to that space, right? So maybe you could dwell in a little into it.
So veterinary education or capacity building of any kind is extremely important to elevate, the welfare and rights of animals across the country. Veterinary education specifically comes under the Indian Veterinary Council Act. It's basically, the syllabus is curated by the Veterinary Council of India. In 2016, we actually ended up revising it after a gap of several decades. It's due for revision again, but we'll get there when we get there. But the question of capacity building is very, very important. Researchers, are now pushing the bar in PhDs, having more studies, being done on what are the gaps. It's not just veterinary education, it's medical education, it's dental education. It's all of these, animals are used and abused across everything and every department. Like, for instance, for several decades now, we've been doing capacity building of government departments, the police department, the animal husbandry department, the municipal corporations, rural welfare, traffic department, the RTOs. There's just enough and more to be done in terms of building capacity. So as the content is being given by our researchers, by more and more people who are, diverting their professional studies towards, animal intersectional subjects, that much more information comes in to upgrade the studies. For instance, there weren't any animal law as a subject within the LLBs, but now it is. We worked with the Bar Council of India, and now it is offered as an optional subject in certain colleges. For veterinary education, it's not just upgrading the syllabus and making it more clinically sound, but it is also about educating our veterinarians on the jurisprudence, on the welfare aspects, on the veterinary responsibilities that they have, because most of them don't know how to collect evidence if there is a case of abuse that comes to them, etc. So all of that, with some international knowledge that we can curate, we are already working with the Veterinary Council of India. Again, it takes time.
I mean, very interesting case and point that I learned for the first time, all right? So we were asked to support ultrasound machine for animals, right? And one is that we went through a lot of discussions because we didn't know if the cows would kick the ultrasound machine, right? So that was a whole logistic thing. Second is that we realized that you have to have a certificate that says that you're not going to do sex determination or determine the sex, even in animals as a law. That was new to us. So we're also figuring it out as we go. I think a very important question to to CK here And I think you spoke a little bit about livelihood and animal welfare, right? And how do you balance? The two, right? In a rural program. So how do we strike a balance? While you spoke a little about it, or we heard about it, would it be possible for you to, detail it out a little?
What I was saying was that the priorities of the human suffering in India and the needs of that far outweigh any feelings any of us, including somebody like me as a vegan, may have for the animal suffering. And therefore an integrated approach where with sustainability at the center of it has got much better chances of bringing CSR support into the animal area. That would be the way to open the door. And therefore it would be good for not-for-profit organizations in the animal welfare, animal rights side to partner with other large NGOs who are already partners with large corporations to build a story like this, a program like that, where animals and animal welfare is part of, let's say, a community development in a village. And then you bring that program is supported by a CSR effort of an organization. The topic gets discussed around the table. The CSR organization of that company, the team, they get the vocabulary starts including animal welfare. And that is how I would begin, as opposed to try and pitch it as a separate thing. The second challenge I've been seeing is, if you look at for example, we make watches. We make 5 or 6 million watches with leather straps, right? Now, the thing is that customers would not buy that watch if that watch did not have a substitute strap which looked as good as that leather strap. And no innovation that's been happening in the last 15 years has managed to actually solve for it. It's difficult, but the fact of the matter is that there is no pineapple skin-based leather strap which is as good as a leather strap. And therefore, a Titan cannot convert all leather straps into a substitute because they would simply not sell. And all those people who are anyway buying those leather straps are not particularly concerned about animal welfare in any case, because they're drinking milk, they're eating meat and all that kind of thing. And leather is anyway supposed to be a byproduct of an animal which has already been killed for meat. So many people don't even feel the guilt because anyway the animal is dead. So instead of a landfill, that leather is being used for a strap and stuff like that. So therefore, the whole ethical supply chain subject, somebody may be signing up, I will go into free range eggs in 2030, but that's some 6 years away and nobody is tracking whether I will move in. So the ethical supply chain side is really challenging. At least the CSR side has got some promise, but the NGOs have to enter through an integrated human animal development program rather than a pure animal thing. The other thing we have started, Parag and I and Sandeep, we have started is reach into the leadership of all the big foundations in this country, the CSR trusts and foundations, and sort of entreat them to bring animals into their overall large budgets, which are not CSR, but foundations like a Nadar Foundation, Tara Trust, Mahindra Foundation. Early days, but that's also some promise which IAF with some other interested people can do.
Thanks. Thank you. And yeah, so the leather industry is interesting, right? Perhaps it's not the onus of the stakeholders sometimes to change the behavior. It's also the responsibility of the industry to make it more ethical and cleaner. In the end product would always be something that the stakeholder will continue to buy, maybe in a more ethical form, right? So maybe a non-leather product, which is as good as the leather products that have been provided. So I think that part is also important. Coming to Shrikant and Kalpana, very quickly, action points. If you could give me 2 action points, because we are already, at 12 o'clock. So maybe an action point, and then we will wrap up.
So should I go
Shrikant?
first?
Okay, yeah, Kalpana, please go ahead.
So
Quick remarks.
Yeah, just
Oh,
remarks. Well, the thing is, awareness, I think, is the key factor, and then implementation. The laws can be there in place, but implementation, because I hear they're saying that India has robust laws, but our implementation are absolutely appalling because there's no awareness, there's no knowledge, there's no understanding. So that is, I mean, thank God to a lot of videos that are going on. I think the movies, the films that are there, documentaries, nobody perhaps has that kind of time to watch a long movie, but very short clippings important. Uh, Equally, I would think that if these awareness movies can be a beautiful film like Dory, Finding Dory, or things like that, can be made in Hindi or any of the regional languages, can reach to the younger generations, and they are the ones who will change. And of course, much more knowledge. I mean, on an everyday basis, I try to do my own awareness. Whoever it is, I'll send back the things that comes through, even if it's a prasad. I'll send a note saying thank you very much, but this is not vegan. So it may sound rude, it may sound tough, but I do it because I can. So I think we all in our own ways, but to scale it up, awareness is the first thing. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I have time. I must tell you, the very sensitive, lovely judges who are good friends of ours have said, "Oh, we are vegan too. I eat chicken, but I'm vegan." So I'll take the next 5 minutes and tell them what vegan is. I had a very dear friend from Bombay who was a very eminent lawyer, who was a great friend of ours and my husband's junior when he was a lawyer. And he says, "Oh, vegan, it's so, what's a big deal? It's just not having milk, right?" So it's the awareness is so poor, and you don't have to be an animal lover to be vegan. You have to just feel that, would I like to be treated like this? No, I cannot have the right to treat somebody else. I've been
you're important. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I think Venkat, you could perhaps introduce vegan leather straps, because the Tatas have started vegan silk saris, and I was one of the persons who dashed down and bought a few because I wanted to give them to people as awareness that you can. I mean, you have cupboardfuls of silk saris. How about trying out a few vegan silk saris? Likewise, leather straps, which can be vegan straps as well. So there is so much one can do. One
Those,
of the
sorry to burden, those saris happen to be from our company only.
Yes, I know. That's what I said. The Tatas are for the vegan silk sarees.
Titan only has got vegan saris.
Yes, I know. And I said if somebody should be the first one to start, perhaps the Tatas would. And so, yeah, in fact, I have been hosting dinners, which I think, Gauri, you're aware of. Several eminent people come. I have the German delegation, the British delegation, the International Court of Justice, whole gamut of it. I give only strictly vegan food and also talk about it. It's not just serve food and you don't talk about it. There's no mock meat, there's no mock this or mock that. It's just very beautifully plated, tasty, amazing food that also raises awareness, because invariably 10-15 minutes of conversation revolves around what veganism is. They may not convert. I had the Brazilian Chief Justice home the other day.
Kalpana, I might have to cut you a little short.
Yeah, so much to say.
I'm so sorry about it. But I think the important point that you made is that we need to demystify veganism, right? It's not just building awareness about animal rights is important, welfare is important, but how do we build a narrative and literature about what you do, right? What is veganism and how do you follow it? And coming back to you, Shrikant, final action points, and then
Yeah, I'll go very quickly. First of all, awareness alone doesn't need to change. It doesn't lead to change. So we have to do other things. Just awareness alone is not sufficient. There's some technological solutions, and being a tech guy in this group, let me just offer you a few of those tech solutions. Number one, lab grown meat is a new idea which is it has a lot of traction. So people who have to eat but want to be vegan can eat lab grown meat. These are animal cells that are sort of multiplied to produce perfectly animal protein that others can have. Number one, there are technologies coming with beautiful alternatives to dairy and all kinds of other leather products. Cork based vegan leather is actually pretty good. I've seen a few firms produce excellent leather products using cork. So Venkat, something for you to think about. And then that's one. Second, I think is tech can dramatically improve productivity in a number of different things, and that can also lead to less more efficiency in farming and therefore maybe reduce animal suffering. And three, in terms of driving change, I think so we have finite resources. And I would take the example of how US elections work. You don't try to convince a Democrat to vote Republican. You don't convince a Republican to vote Democrat. What you do is you look at what are called as the persuadables. People who are sort of in a place where they're ready to move if given the right information and somebody challenges assumptions. So you can use AI and other things to model for who are the persuadables, so that this kind of messaging is directed at people who are in that process, who are ready to change. So that's how you can use technology to bring some change in this world.
Thank you. And also with the change, it has to be affordable, efficient, and as good and of good quality, right? So the lab grown meat, I think, is getting more affordable and is getting to the plates faster than we imagined. Because as a country in India, we managed to make things viable, affordable, and accessible to everybody, right? So I think that's our forte. Thank you so much. A few things. One is that Dasra, for the audience, you've been sent, I hope, a poll uh, sheet. So do fill in that. Second is that every question that you have asked for or asked comments on, we will try and okay, here's the poll. I think that was a prompt also. So every question that you have added to the chat or asked us, Dasra and the team will try and answer these offline to you. And third is that the report is free to download. Please download it. It's 93 pages of pure data and some things that you perhaps have never ever imagined or read before, right? So it's comprehending, or it's basically building together comprehensive all the work that is being done in the animal welfare space. With that, I thank the panelists. Thank you, everybody. I think this was a very enriching and beautiful learning experience for all of us. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we continue to have these sessions in the future. Right? Thank you so much, and take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.